Joy Hibbs was born on September 23, 1955, in the small town of Chief Flint, Florida. The youngest of 9 children, she grew up surrounded by a large and loving family. Joy had a passion for the outdoors. She loved hiking, fishing, and just about anything connected to nature. She also had a strong interest in sports. During her school years, she took up running, even competing in marathons, and was an avid football fan who never missed a game. While still in high school, she met a young man named Charlie. The two quickly bonded, and not long after graduation, they married. The couple eventually moved to Croydon, Pennsylvania. Although Joy dreamed of working in the medical field, her lack of formal education limited her to entry-level positions. She first worked as a veterinary assistant before enrolling in college courses to pursue a medical degree. Her hard work paid off when she secured a job as a physical therapist at a nearby clinic. In 1975, at the age of 20, Joy and Charlie welcomed their first child, a daughter, followed 3 years later by a son. The family settled into a quiet, comfortable neighborhood and seemed to be living the ideal life. To everyone around them, Joy and Charlie looked like the perfect family, the embodiment of the American dream. But on April 19, 1991, everything changed. That morning, 35-year-old Joy prepared her children for school, kissed her husband goodbye as he left for work, and got ready for her evening shift. She ran a few errands, stopping at the grocery store and the bank. Around 1 p.m., her 12-year-old son David came home from school and noticed his mother's car outside. Excited to share his good grades, he ran toward the house, only to spot thick smoke seeping out. At first, he thought she might have left something on the stove, but when he opened the door, he was met with flames consuming the home. Panicked, David tried to go inside to find his mother, but the fire and smoke forced him back. Neighbors had already noticed the smoke and quickly called the fire department. Firefighters rushed to the scene, battled the blaze, and eventually extinguished it. In the last room they searched, they found a body. When paramedics and police arrived, they assumed it was Joy, though the remains were too badly burned for immediate confirmation. The body was sent to the medical examiner for identification. News of the fire spread rapidly through town. Joy's daughter, who was still at school, heard what happened and ran home, finding her younger brother in tears. Soon after, Charlie arrived. The moment police told him a body had been discovered, he collapsed in shock. At first, firefighters worked under the assumption that the blaze might have been accidental. David, however, was overwhelmed with guilt. He had a computer in his room with multiple cords plugged into a single outlet near a fish tank. Since his mother's body was found in his room, he believed the fire started because of his negligence, and that she had died trying to put it out. But as firefighters examined the wreckage, unusual details stood out. The flames had originated in several separate spots, something extremely rare in accidental fires. Investigators eventually identified 4 distinct ignition points. Though the exact method remained unclear, it was evident this was no accident. It was arson. They also discovered all 4 gas burners on the kitchen stove had been left on, with debris scattered across them, suggesting accelerants had been used to spread the fire. The medical examiner's report soon confirmed the suspicions. The victim was indeed Joy, but she had not died from the fire. There was no smoke in her lungs, proving she was already dead before the flames began. Even more disturbing, her body bore multiple cuts, bruises, and stab wounds. The case was reclassified as a homicide, and investigators began their search for clues. But progress was difficult. The fire had destroyed much of the evidence, and no foreign DNA was recovered from Joy's body. With little physical evidence, detectives turned their focus toward potential suspects. Their first was Joy's husband, Charlie. Though he had been at work when the fire started, police considered whether he could have slipped away, committed the crime, and returned to create an alibi. Yet there was no sign of marital troubles. Family and friends all described the couple as happy, and Charlie appeared truly devastated by his wife's death. Even so, detectives kept Charlie on their radar for a while before eventually turning their attention to other possible leads. They began interviewing Joy's friends and coworkers, asking whether she had conflicts with anyone or if someone might have had a motive to harm her. But everyone said the same thing: Joy was warm, kind, and never caused trouble. Investigators also considered whether she might have been randomly targeted. Charlie told them that every Friday Joy went to the bank to cash a check, and on the day of the fire she would have been carrying some cash. Her wallet, later found on the couch, was empty, and her purse had been dumped on the kitchen floor as though someone had been searching for something. Detectives theorized she could have been followed home, or the house broken into for a robbery. But this idea quickly lost traction since nothing valuable besides a small amount of money was missing. The intruder hadn't touched any other possessions, making a robbery seem unlikely. Investigators then began leaning toward the possibility that Joy had been specifically targeted. Soon, they uncovered troubling details about the months leading up to her death. Her family revealed several disturbing incidents: a brick thrown through their window, damage to their front door, and the tires of Joy's car slashed while parked outside. At the time, Joy and Charlie dismissed these as random acts of vandalism. But in hindsight, after her murder, they seemed connected. Police started questioning neighbors, though no one recalled seeing anything during those earlier incidents. However, several neighbors did remember something unusual on the day of the fire: a blue Monte Carlo parked in front of Joy's house shortly before the blaze. Unfortunately, no one got a clear look at the driver or the license plate. When detectives mentioned the car to Joy's family, they got their first significant lead. Her son explained that Joy's friend April sometimes drove a similar car. Looking into it, investigators learned that April and her husband Robert had lived only a few houses away but had recently lost their home due to financial struggles and moved elsewhere. According to friends and relatives, Joy and April had become close soon after April's family moved into the neighborhood. April's story, however, came with darker details. Neighbors described her husband Robert as aggressive and short-tempered, with rumors that he physically abused her. Because of this, April often sought refuge at Joy's home with her children. Joy's son also recalled hearing a tense phone call in which Robert not only shouted at his mother but openly threatened her. Detectives began digging into Robert's background and quickly discovered a lengthy criminal history, mostly involving drugs. This made him an even stronger suspect. They speculated that Robert may have resented Joy for providing support to April, and that this resentment could have escalated to murder. Police reached out to the Narcotics Division, who knew Robert well from prior cases, and the officers agreed to help. They even spoke to Robert directly, but he denied involvement. He insisted he had been away with his wife and children for the entire weekend on vacation. However, since Joy was killed on a Friday afternoon, investigators realized Robert could have visited her home before leaving town. Adding to their suspicions, officers noticed a fresh scratch on his arm during questioning. Still, Robert firmly denied guilt. Within days, he stopped cooperating altogether on his lawyer's advice. He refused a polygraph test and cut off further communication with detectives. Left without hard evidence, investigators focused on linking him to the crime. They returned to the neighbors who had seen the blue car outside Joy's house and brought them to Robert's residence, hoping they could confirm it was his. But this led to another setback. Robert's Monte Carlo wasn't blue, it was black. Neighbors also said his car didn't match the one they remembered. On top of that, detectives confirmed Robert's alibi. He and his family had checked into a hotel in another city that Friday, and just before leaving home, he had been on the phone with one of his wife's friends at nearly the same time Joy was killed. Armed with this new perspective, investigators began to reconsider Robert's role as the prime suspect and shifted their attention once again. They took another look at Charlie, and this time, they uncovered an interesting detail. Speaking with Joy's coworkers, detectives learned she had been receiving threatening phone calls. One coworker even suspected the caller might have been Charlie, though she never confronted Joy about it. Still, Charlie had a strong alibi. Several coworkers confirmed he was at his job on the day of the murder. While investigators couldn't entirely dismiss the possibility that he might have slipped away unnoticed, his behavior during questioning didn't point to guilt. Over the following months, Charlie underwent several polygraph tests, and was repeatedly questioned, but nothing suggested his involvement. He had no criminal history and no record of abusive behavior toward Joy. Eventually, police concluded he was unlikely to be responsible. With no evidence and no viable suspects, the case stalled. Occasional attempts were made to revisit it, but each effort led nowhere. For decades, Joy's case remained unsolved. As her children grew older, the lack of answers continued to haunt them. Her son, in particular, frequently contacted police, urging them to reopen the investigation. But each time, he was left disappointed. In one conversation, detectives admitted they still suspected Charlie but lacked proof. Finally, in 2014, 23 years after Joy's death, the case was officially reopened and assigned to the Cold Case Unit. A new team of detectives began combing through the evidence from scratch, and they quickly noticed something unusual. Many of the original communications involving Robert had been handled not by homicide detectives, but by the Narcotics Division. This struck them as both odd and highly unprofessional. Wanting answers, they tracked down one of the investigators who had worked the case in 1991. At first, he refused to talk, but after repeated attempts, he finally opened up. What he revealed shocked them. From the start, Robert had looked like the prime suspect, but investigators had been told to avoid pursuing him. The reason? Robert was working as an informant for the Narcotics Division. At the time, it was already known that Robert was an informant, but the new detectives were stunned to learn how much this had affected the case. Robert had been a key source in a massive narcotics operation, and the department had been unwilling to risk jeopardizing it, even at the cost of a murder investigation. As a result, the original inquiry into Robert was superficial at best. For the new team, this marked a turning point. They set out to re-examine Robert's alibi and reconstruct the timeline. First, they tracked down Robert's wife's friend, the one he claimed to have phoned around the time Joy was killed. She confirmed the call happened, but clarified that it occurred much later in the day, closer to evening, not in the afternoon as originally recorded. Next, detectives re-interviewed the hotel witnesses who said Robert had checked in with his family around lunchtime. This time, they stated the family actually arrived closer to 5 p.m., leaving Robert with enough time to commit the murder beforehand. Investigators then questioned April, who by then was divorced from Robert. She continued to back up his alibi, insisting he couldn't have been involved. Despite being pressed multiple times, she refused to change her story. Detectives kept pushing forward, reviewing evidence and seeking new leads. Years passed with little progress until 2016, when something completely unexpected happened. April walked into the police station and asked to speak with investigators. She explained that a series of hardships in her life had made her rethink her silence about Joy's murder. April admitted she had lied all those years and that Robert's alibi was false. On the day of the killing, she said, Robert came home covered in blood. When she asked what happened, he told her plainly, "I stabbed someone and set a house on fire." He then ordered her to pack up their children for a trip. They left town under the pretense of a family getaway. Robert brought a large bag with him, and during a walk in the park, he slipped into the woods alone. When he returned, the bag was gone. Only days later, when detectives arrived at their house, did April realize Robert had murdered Joy. She confronted him, begging him to confess, but he beat her and threatened to frame her for the crime if she ever told anyone. For years, she had been too terrified to come forward, but in 2016 she finally found the courage to reveal the truth. April's testimony dramatically shifted the case, but detectives knew they still needed hard evidence, or, ideally, a confession. To gather more proof, they devised a plan and asked April to cooperate. Police wired her and staged a scenario where officers visited her home to question her. Right after they left, she called Robert, telling him detectives had been asking about Joy's murder and she didn't know how to respond. Robert's immediate reaction was to urge her not to talk and to avoid answering any questions. His defensive, evasive response only made him look more guilty. With this recording secured, detectives prepared to take the case to trial. The investigation stretched on for years, but in May 2022, Robert was finally arrested. He continued to insist he was innocent, yet the district attorney believed the evidence against him was strong enough to secure a conviction. April was set to be the prosecution's key witness, and the case appeared to be moving steadily forward, until an unexpected twist emerged in court. When Robert's son took the stand, he revealed that his father had confessed to the crime. According to him, Robert had called shortly after speaking with April, saying police were questioning her about the murder and that he might face a life sentence. Robert told his son he wanted to prepare him for what could happen, and during the conversation, he began sharing details. Though he didn't give a direct admission, he used phrases like, "I think I did it." His son's testimony further solidified an already strong case. Still, the prosecution faced a lingering question: what was Robert's motive? The evidence showed he had clashed with Joy in the past, displayed violent tendencies, and had a long criminal record. It also appeared he had taken the cash Joy withdrew from the bank just hours before she was killed. But then, a darker possibility came to light. When the case resurfaced in the news, Robert's relatives from another state reached out to detectives. They explained that years earlier, when Robert was a teenager, he had assaulted and beaten his aunt, who bore a striking resemblance to Joy. This raised the theory that Robert may have attacked Joy with the intent to sexually assault her, though proving it was no longer possible. Despite the unanswered questions, the jury convicted Robert of Joy's murder, sentencing him to life in prison. While justice had finally been served, the details of the case sparked outrage. For more than 30 years, Robert had lived freely, largely because police chose to protect a narcotics investigation over pursuing the truth about Joy's death. In effect, her life had been treated as less important than a drug trafficking case. Even so, Joy's family expressed deep gratitude to the new team of detectives who never gave up. For her son, who had spent decades haunted by suspicion that his father might have been responsible, a suspicion planted by the original investigators, the truth had finally been revealed. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.